All right, well, welcome everybody to Solar Noon Tuesday for, September 26th. And we'll start out as per usual with the news of the week. And then I'll open it up for discussion items for folks. And then also we'll have the events, and then we'll do a little bit of a deep dive into a topic that I've selected. So you've got no choice in it. So this is the solar news for the week of September 24th. And the White House recently announced a new initiative they're calling the Civilian Climate Corps. And what this is designed to do, it's patterned after the Civilian Conservation Corps from the Depression era, the 1930s. And this is hoping to put as many as 20,000 young people to work in clean energy, also dealing with conservation and climate resilience issues. That's about as far as they've defined this. They hope to put that many to work in the first year. It's a lot like the AmeriCorps or the Peace Corps type projects. They will be paid internships, looking at pre-apprenticeship programs or just workforce training programs in renewable energy, but also they're looking to try and clear through. There's apparently about a $12 billion backlog of repairs and upkeep of the national park system. So that's another project. And then, of course, climate resilience, however that manifests itself. It is going to begin, I guess, this year. So we'll see how that works out. For the first time, Florida has beat out California and Texas as the state that has installed the largest amount of solar for the first 6 months of 2023. They installed about 2,499 megawatts of solar, compared with California that installed 1,648 and Texas that installed 1,292 megawatts. So before we pat Florida on the back, one of the issues there is, of course, their policies in that state really do favor utility scale solar as opposed to homeowner solar. There is no net metering laws that are in place, or RPS is in place there. So 86% of this new solar that was installed this year was installed by the utilities, and only 14% were installed by homeowners and companies. They do have a long way to go to catch up in the total installed base with California and Texas. Florida currently has about 12,612 megawatts of installed capacity versus Texas that has 18,800. And California is far and away number one with 41,675 megawatts of power of solar installed. There's a real mega trend going on in our industry where we see proprietary solutions, sort of a vertical market integration of product lines. We've seen that with Enphase, where Enphase has their microinverters and their chargers and their combiner boxes and their smart switches and their load management systems, and they all have to be integrated. They're not mix and match with other products. Well, Q-Cells has just gotten into this business as well. Q-Cell is the largest seller of solar panels worldwide, the number one brand in volume. And they've come out with their Q Home Care system. And this is a DC coupled system. So they've now are offering a proprietary 7.6 kW inverter. Then they have Q-Save batteries. Each of these batteries is 5 kilowatt hours, and you can stack up to 4 of them in one of these home systems. So you could have 4 batteries with a 7.6 kW inverter. And then there's what they call their Q Home Hub, and that is a smart switch load management type system. Q-Cells is a South Korean company. As I mentioned, it's the largest manufacturer of solar panels worldwide. but they have just opened up a manufacturing plant in the United States. It's the largest solar manufacturing facility in the Western Hemisphere, located in Dalton, Georgia. And that's part of the whole Inflation Reduction Act motivation for domestic product. So we're seeing a lot of the global manufacturers opening up manufacturing facilities here in the US. The US Department of Defense has announced that they're doing a prototype. It's a dispatchable microgrid, and this is being put in place in Stewart Air National Guard facility up there in New York. And they're partnering in with a battery company called Redflow, or a storage company called Redflow, and Ameresco, which is an installation or an integrator company. And what they're hoping to do is put in a 1.2 to a 1.4 megawatt hour microgrid. And then they'll work through all of the bugs, but the concept is then they can have a self-contained and dispatchable or movable energy system that they could use in a forward deployment area, for instance, in a conflict, or at any number of there are about 450 or more bases that the U.S. Defense Department operates worldwide. So we're beginning to see this trend develop, something we've talked about in the past. Google and Level 10 Energy have announced that they're creating this platform that's supposed to facilitate the creation of power purchase agreements. And of course, typically power purchase agreements, that's usually when a company like Google or Amazon or some company like that wants to buy power from a third party. They enter into a power purchasing agreement. This process usually takes about 12 months. Google and Level 10 are hoping to reduce that time period down to about 2 to 3 months. And they're doing this by essentially creating this online no bid. There's no RFQs, it's all kind of integrated together to just walk through that process and try and minimize the amount of time that's involved. And this is important because right now in the pipeline in the United States, there's more energy in the pipeline waiting to be connected to the grid, just waiting for purchase agreements and interconnection agreements, than all of the generating capacity that exists in the United States from all forms of energy. So huge backlog, and we're going to have to figure out how to work through this backlog if we're going to transition to the clean energy economy. And a new study has found, and this is right in line with something we talked about last week, that solar is better than corn when it comes to the use of farmland. And we talked last week about the no solar on prime farmland. Well, it turns out that of all of the corn that is grown in the United States, 45% of it goes to the production of ethanol. It's non-food, non-human, non-animal consumption. So there are currently 30 million acres of farmland that are devoted just to the growing of corn for ethanol. A study by the Department of Energy and the National Wildlife Federation found that when you factor in this land use cost, that actually ethanol is about 24% more carbon intensive than gasoline. So it's not really a clean energy from that perspective. Solar, to produce the same or the equivalent energy as ethanol, takes about 1/3 of the land space as corn production takes. It also uses, of course, a lot less water. It's a lot more environmentally friendly because corn production uses pesticides, herbicides, and fertilizers, which is actually quite an industrial process for our farmland. And actually, the production of using a solar array is a lot more profitable for the farmer. Corn in a really good year will make the farmer about $450 an acre in profit, and that doesn't take into account the cost of land if they're cash renting the land, which averages around $325 an acre. Where leasing to a solar farm will bring in between $1,000 to $2,000 a year per acre for the farmer, and is, of course, guaranteed income for that period of the lease, which usually is going to be around 20 years. And that's all the news I have from the solar industry for this week. Anybody have any comments or anything they want to add to that for the moment? Encourage you to jump on in. Give you just a second. Got to go quick. Snooze, you lose. You can interrupt me here if something occurs to you. So then, as again per normal, I will announce some of the announcements of the week. And tomorrow on the 27th at 11 a.m., there's a webinar on charging networks, the electrifying mobility, the race to deploy critical networks, critical charging networks. And once again, rather than try and put links and all of this into this, if you want this, just Google it. Otherwise, you can send me an email and I'll send you the link if you can't find it. Any of these. The 27th at 11:30, maximizing the benefits for modular battery energy storage systems. So I think this is utility scale. Then there's another one on the 27th at 1, Fortress Power. So this is a residential scale solution, and this is from Renvu, and they typically have some pretty good webinars available. All these are free. Then on the 28th, 2 p.m., there's high efficient string inverters. Again, this is a utility scale oriented webinar. On October 3rd, there's a residential scale Everholt home battery systems, just probably a sales pitch, but if you're interested in that, certainly join on in. On October 5th at 7 p.m., Solar United Neighbors is hosting one, which could be an interesting discussion about stopping the utilities from using our money against us. Basically how the utilities are lobbying against renewable energy using, rate holders' money. So if you're a rate holder, which most of us are, a ratepayer, then, they're taking the money you're paying them and using it to lobby it against what would be, in my opinion, our own interests. So we'll see how that works out. On October 10th, 2 p.m., safe EV deployment. This is more of a discussion from IREC, so if you want to take part in that. And then there's another webinar. This was interesting. It's a little bit different than what we see oftentimes, not really technical, but it's talking about basically workforce management, workforce well-being. So they're talking about emotional well-being, which is becoming more and more a critical issue, especially with younger folks. And then there's October 12th. There's regenerative AI for renewable energy at 2. And then I put in this publication just because it's out there and available if you're interested in getting some statistics. It's the Standard & Poor's Global Market Intelligence for the first 2 quarters of this year. Basically, as it says there, U.S. solar and wind by the numbers, mostly about storage systems. So that's available, and you can Google that and download it. And then I'll just remind everybody that if you go to solarpvtraining.com, we have online and in-person solar training courses available. So if you want to jump on in there and take a look at what's on the agenda, I certainly want to encourage you to do that. And those are the announcements I have. I saw some things going on in chat as I was talking. Does anybody else have any other announcements they want to share? Events, things that are going on? Yeah. Okay, guess not. You can check the chat for that. All right, so I thought this week the item that I would sort of take a look at is just how long solar panels realistically are expected to last, and what are some of the issues around that. I sometimes feel like everybody already knows these things, but then I get a lot of questions from folks who clearly they hear misinformation or they're not really sure about it. And they're always surprised when I say most of these are warranted for about 25 years. So just thought I'd take a look at it see what some of the issues are, what some of the situations are, because it changes, from year to year as products change, get better, are developed using different techniques. So I'll touch base in here. And as always, if you've got any questions as we go through or anything you want to add, really it's best when it's a bit of a discussion. So jump on in. All right. So what if we deal with it from a perspective of warranties, and this is usually when somebody says, how long do solar panels last or whatever, usually you say, well, they're warranted for 25 years, but that's not always the case. And what do we mean by warranted for 25 years? There we're usually talking about performance warranties, and these performance warranties are that they're not going to degrade past a certain point over 25 years. So it's really warranting the production of the panel for a period of time. Then there's another one, and I'll dig a little deeper into these, but there's also product warranty. And these product warranties are like 5 to 10 years. This is basically, it's not going to fall apart. It's not going to break, due to manufacturing errors. If you run over it with a truck, yeah, it's going to break. But if the solder comes loose or the junction box, comes unglued, or the cells start to separate, or water infiltration, those would be the kind of things you would have under a product warranty. And typically with a solar panel, it's going to happen early in its life if it's going to happen because of some defect in manufacturing. So 5 to 10 years, pretty close. Pretty standard and probably all you need. And then the inverter warranties, well, this is really focused on solar panels, but I threw that in. Usually 5 years, but you get some of the better ones are 10 years. And some of them you can buy a warranty extension, which will take it up to 20, 25 years. So that's something there to worry about. Many installers will offer installation warranties. So an installation warranty would be if I hire a company and they come and they put everything in, they're going to say, you know what, we'll guarantee our work for a period of time, a couple of years, 1, 2 years. Again, if there was a problem, it's going to probably manifest itself early on, but wouldn't be a bad idea to get that kind of warranty from your installer. Another consideration here, like the solar panels, they're typically considered part of the home once they're installed on the home or the property. So your homeowner's insurance may cover this. So, depending on your solar warranty, but if something happens, some damage or whatever, it may be covered under your homeowner's policy. So you might want to check on that with your homeowner insurance carrier. And if you're receiving a REAP grant or something like that, many of the grants that are out there do require that you specifically, set aside your insurance, have it list your solar array as being insured to cover that. Okay, so what is the performance warranties of most solar panels? Typically, if you've gone through our classes, we'll usually say, okay, they anticipate they're going to degrade about 0.5% a year over time. Well, it's not really a straight linear degrading. It's not like in the first year you lose 0.5%, second year it's 1%, third year 1.5%. Doesn't really work like that. It's very much front end loaded because of something called LID, or light induced degradation, or PID, which is potential induced degradation. That's for higher voltages systems. But anyway, so you can get a warranty that is linear in nature, 0.5% each year, so that at the end of, say, 20 years, it should be producing 90% of its installed or its listed production. Then it would still be under warranty. Or they might have steps. So in the first 10 years, it'll produce 90%. Then in the second 10 years, 80%, and you're still operating within warranty. So those are the two types of warranties. that you're often going to run around or find for performance. And production warranty, there we're talking about lifespan, equipment, materials. So, and those are usually going to be about 5 to 10 years. This down below here, we're like the top 4 companies, and these are talking about their performance warranties. Just to give you a sense of it, I have another diagram or chart here that goes a little more in depth. But Q Cells, they give a 25-year warranty. They say it's going to be 0.54% every year. So at the end of this warranty, it'd be 85%. Panasonic, they're anticipating only 0.26. So they're going to say it's going to be almost 91% efficient at the end of 25 years. SunPower, 25-year, 0.3. So now you're going to pay for I think Panasonic and SunPower are often considered the very high-end solar panels. So you're going to pay for that. And that's going to be 92%. And then LG, I think they got out of the panel manufacturing. I might have that confused, but there's a 0.4. So that gives you a little bit of a sense of that. So what's not covered in a solar warranty? Well, typically they're not going to say that it's going to produce, because you may have installed it at a weird angle, at a weird orientation, maybe you have shading or whatever. So they're not going to say what it's going to produce. They're just going to say whatever it produced on the first day, assuming no changes, it should still be 90% efficient or whatever. They're not going to pay for the cost of labor to diagnose the problem, or perhaps the shipping costs to get those panels to you. So they will maybe pay for the equipment itself, but maybe not the shipping. And damage that is outside of their control, basically, like power surge that blows things up, fire, flood, lightning strike, just acts of nature. A tree falls on the solar panels. Your warranty's not gonna cover that. So these really are production issues if the panel's undamaged. They may cover hail, if they've warranted or they've said it meets a certain hail limitation. But they're also not going to cover it if somebody trashes them. If somebody vandalizes it or a truck drives into your ground-mounted array or something like that. I always love acts of war, let's hope not. And, things that are outside of their control. That makes sense. And usually they're not going to cover the cost of replacement, the labor that's involved in taking the panels off of the house and replacing it. They're just going to send you a new panel and they might charge you shipping. So that's kind of where you're at, and how you get it up on your roof is up to you for the most part. But that is changing. In fact, I pulled up this diagram here. And what we've got here is really some recent information. And I just thought this was helpful to show what's out there and what you should consider. SunPower, which I said is a high-end brand, 25 years, 92% DC, 90% AC, 25 years. They will pay for the shipping to get to you. There is no extended product warranty, so you can't extend it beyond the 25 years. And it is transferable. So if you sell your house, sell the panels, it could be transferred, but you got to fill out transfer paperwork. Panasonic, so on, very similar. They will pay for shipping. Again, very much the same as SunPower. You get down, let's shift down here to Q Cells. 25 years tells you how much that is. So it's basically 85%. After 25 years, they won't pay for shipping. You can extend it, and it automatically transfers. So no need to fill out the paperwork. It just automatically there. A lot of these, like Silfab, Solaria, a lot of those, it automatically transfers over. So this diagram gives you a good indication of just what's out there in the marketplace. So, all right, I'll pause here just to catch my breath, see if anybody has any questions at the moment. Just to remind you, you're certainly able. So what causes degradation? Oh, let's see. I see. Pete, is that you raising your hand, or is that just an emoji that popped up? No.
No,
Okay.
that's me raising my hand.
Oh
Um,
yeah. Okay.
on
Sorry.
the subject of buying extended warranties, I
Uh-huh.
have pointed out to people, I want you to clarify for the whole group, the meaning of tier one, tier two, and tier three suppliers. And I have told people that tier three supplier is the financial rating, and it's the lowest financial rating. And to buy an extended warranty from a tier three supplier, to my thinking, is about like buying a lottery ticket. Fill us in and clarify all that for me, please.
Yeah, you're right. It's like a Standard and Poor's rating. It's basically about the financial health of the company. So tier one is a company that's been in business for a while, has a good balance sheet. Tier three may be a great panel, right? But it's probably a startup. Very much may not be around in 5 years. To address some of that, oftentimes the warranties are underwritten by a third party like American Express or Lloyd's of London. So you might want to see, is that warranty guaranteed by the company itself, or is it underwritten by another company that you maybe have a little more faith in? Robert, I see your hand raised there. Yep, I'm not hearing anything from you. You were unmuted. I don't know. Something's wrong with your system because I see you unmuting, but you're not hearing you. So maybe you can throw it into the chat or try it and just interrupt while I'm talking. Anybody else have any questions? All right. So hopefully, Robert, you'll shout at us here in a second. So what causes some of the degrading of these panels, as they wear out? Because we're saying they wear out 0.5% a year or whatever. Well, part of it is thermal cycling. So if you go from extreme heat to extreme cold, that causes some expansion and contraction, and it can cause some damage to the panel itself, perhaps micro cracking. If you have a damp heat, like Siggy down there in Tampa Bay, high temperatures with high humidity can cause some of the materials to separate within the panel. Humidity freeze, if it's very damp and then you suddenly get a cold snap, you can get some of the, they're specifically saying the junction box adhesion could fail, but it could cause expansion if moisture gets in between things. And then UV exposure, of course, and that often can degrade the back sheet. That's the panel of metal that's on the very back of the cells, and it can cause problems. And of course, light causes problems. In fact, I wanted to, getting a little more technical in this, but the two terms you'll see thrown around when you're talking about panel degradation is light-induced degradation, or LID. And LID is caused as soon as the panel is exposed to sunlight. There are some chemical processes that take place within the silicon cells, and basically oxygen gets into the silicon and the boron dopant, whatever, that they dope some of the panels with, or some of the cells with, and it basically degrades its ability to transfer energy. It fills up some of those electron holes. And they anticipate you really lose about 3% of the power almost right away. They say within the first year, but some articles I've read, it says within hours, of putting this thing out in the sunshine, it's going to degrade, and that's going to happen. Now, I have seen a lot of the panels start to market themselves as lid avoiding. They're changing some of the chemical composition of their panels to avoid some of this degradation. So you might want to look for that. And PID is potential induced degradation. And if I didn't look too close on it, but I remember vaguely, has to do with distances between or differences in the reference point to ground in a long string. And these are really for high voltage systems, essentially commercial or utility scale systems. and anything 1,000 volts or greater. And they do now have some equipment that you can install into these systems to try and mitigate PID to avoid that loss. So that if you're doing larger systems, higher voltage systems, you might want to look into that if you haven't already, to make sure that you don't have losses there due to that. And what are some of the weather issues that you're going to be dealing with? Well, high heat. High heat is one that causes an expansion of things within the panel, so you can get some micro cracking. For example, PVAL, which is the ones who rate solar panels as an organization, they looked at the operations of 36 projects in India, and they found that in the places that had a high heat, they saw an annual degrading of about 1.5%, more or less. But in the mountainous and the cooler areas, it was only about half that amount. So heat definitely will impact how quickly the solar panel degrades. So if you're installing it in a very cool climate, it should last or produce longer. Then strong winds. So far, all of this isn't lining up very well for Florida, right? High heat, high humidity, strong winds. Strong winds can cause some flexing within the unit as you see the stresses of the wind flowing over, pushing down, pulling up. It can cause micro cracks. One way to deal with this can be within your racking system, and there are racking systems that are really designed for high wind areas that will absorb some of that tension there to minimize the micro cracking. Salt water. If you happen to be installing right near the ocean and you get salt water on it, the primary concern of this has to do with the salts drying and then clouding the face. So it's just a matter of washing the panels to eliminate that. But in severe cases, they can cause corrosion, not only for the metal parts, but also the glass itself can corrode. And that, of course, is going to wear out the panel very quickly. And I think this is going to be a big issue in marina environments. And, there's a lot of boats now that are starting to have solar panels installed on them. So that's going to be a bigger and bigger issue there. Most of us don't live right on the waterfront. If you do, you probably got better things to do with your time than sit here and talk about solar. All right, and then what is the actual failure rate? Well, there have been a number of studies out there, but the one I found interesting is when they did a review of a very large segment of solar panels, they found a rate of about 0.05%. So 5 panels out of every 10,000 tend to fail annually. So pretty good rate of consistent performance. And if we look at why they're failing, well, once again, most of the failures are going to happen very early on. They call those infant failures. And they're things that probably just manufacturing problems. You got a bad panel. So that's something where the glass is broken or loose frame or the box, the J box is not adhered very well, or bad soldering. That could be another thing. Then in the midlife crisis here, a lot of that's going to be PID failure, potential induced degradation, interconnection, the backseat. That's all of the things that come from PID. They're showing that a lot of the early on losses are due to lid, light. The LETID, the LETID, I'm not quite sure. That's basically high temperature light induced degradation. And then, of course, the rest of it just goes out. It's general wear out over time. So what is the actual lifespan? Because we're still in the very early stages of solar. And a lot of people will want to say, okay, at the end of 25 years, we're going to have all of these panels. You'll see these articles all the time. This many millions of panels have been installed, and in 25 years, the landfills are going to be full of solar panels and all of that. Well, maybe not, because solar panels warranted for 25 years. They may last a lot longer than that. My guess is they will be replaced because they're no longer as efficient as other options, but it's not because they failed. It's because, you know, they're old, they're inefficient. So for example, the oldest solar panel, quote unquote, that was ever built, you know, the modern one is still functioning. It's that little round unit. The panels, the cells were actually put on a ball, and it was built in 1950. Generated a whole 1.5 volts, but it's still plugging away. You know, so that's 73 years later. And the oldest array in operation is in Germany. And that panel, I think, did I zoom in on that? Nope, I didn't. All right, so yeah, its rated output power was 10.3 watts. So that's a huge array, right? So anyway, the if I remember right, yeah, it was 336 panels for a grand total of 3,460 watts. So each of the panels were 10 watts, and actually it was installed in 1976. By 2011, they were still generating almost 10 watts. So pretty good efficiency, consistency there for those. So that's the oldest array that modern day array that was still functioning. All right. So any questions for this week, or anything else anybody wants to add to the conversation? Give me just a second. Okay, well, hearing none, I thank you for your attention, and we'll see you next week. Oh, what about disposal? Okay, yep, we got one. Yeah, I looked up into that. Currently, about 10% of the solar panels are recycled today, which means 90% are not. They're just landfilled. Once again, we're in very early stages on this, and there are a lot of solar panel manufacturers that are coming out with end of life guarantees, essentially. So they're working with some of the recycling centers that say, okay, at the end of the life, we will be responsible for, you know, picking them up and recycling them. So, so I think within 10 years, for sure, as this becomes a problem, that we'll see the vast majority of them being recycled. I just have to believe that. Although then, of course, technologies are going to change, and the processes may become more difficult or easier. I don't know. Silicon panels are pretty easy to recycle. It's the primary components are aluminum, silver, and silicon. You know, so silicon being glass. So those aspects, it's really just a matter of how do you separate them, and so that's. But I don't think that's going to be a major problem. People will talk about it, but I don't think it's a major problem. Will they be able to use them? Yeah, already they're reusing the silicon, they're reusing the silver. I don't know about some of the other chemicals and how they deal with that, like the boron and the arsenic that's part of the doping process. But those are trace amounts. But it's still a concern. How do you dispose of those? But it's a concern in all aspects of life. You know, how are they disposing of mattresses? I would think that's a bigger problem. I see that on the street all the time. You know, people throwing out mattresses. Why are not we asking mattress manufacturers to have an end of life program for their products? You know, it's oftentimes we hold ourselves to a different level. PV Magazine article on top common perk, different degrading issues, N-type versus P-type. Yeah, that gets into the whole thing about as you create differences in manufacturing processes, then the recycling is gonna be problematic. And you know, already we're seeing some of these with perovskite, you know, layers on the silicon panels, and I don't know how that affects the recycling process as well. All right. That's good to have some of that in chat. Anybody else have anything? Otherwise, we'll terminate discussion.
Jay, Dave
Yeah.
and Anil, just a quick question.
Sure.
When you look at the overall life cycle of a PP module. I mean, we talk about the silicon and the, but when you look at the other materials in the module, like the cabling, the framing of the anodized aluminum, all those other things, how those things match up realistically over, let's say, 30 years or 20 years, the panel?
Yeah, that's what I understand is the frame. You're talking about the silicon lasting 25 years, but does the wire last 25 years? Does the aluminum frame last 25 years? Yeah, I think they try and manufacture those to match. I would think that some of the wiring connections would be maybe a point of failure. It always is a point of failure in pretty much everything. So, but I think that's why they go with the MC4 connectors. They're pretty robust. So they're trying to design them to be 25-year. All right. Okay. Well, this time for sure, I'm getting out of here. All right. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.